In March 2026, a British hedge fund manager named James, not his real name, but his story is real, woke up at 4 a.m. in his 42nd floor Dubai Marina apartment. He had lived there for 3 years. He had moved his wife, his 2 children, his entire business operation from London, specifically to be in that apartment, in that building, in that city. He had paid $68,000 a year in rent. He had enrolled his kids in the best international school in the Emirate. He had opened accounts at 4 different private banks in the DIFC. He had referred 11 of his colleagues to Dubai. He had told anyone who would listen that Dubai was the future. That night, James packed 4 suitcases, put his family in a black car, drove to a private terminal at the airport, and boarded a charter flight to London. That cost him $120,000. He left everything else behind: the furniture, the cars, the lease with 8 months remaining, the school year half finished. He did not look back. James is not alone. He is one of more than 40,000 people who left Dubai in the space of just 28 days in early 2026. And here is the question this video is going to answer: not just what happened, but why. Not just the numbers, but the psychology. Why do the world's most rational, most calculated, most strategically minded people and family offices and billion-dollar companies make a decision that fast? What do they know that most of us don't? What is the logic inside that choice? Because understanding why they left tells you everything about how the world's wealthy actually think, about risk, about safety, about money, about the cities they choose and the cities they abandon. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will change the way you read every financial headline you see for the rest of your life. Before we talk about why they left, we need to talk about who they are, because when most people hear the world's richest people are fleeing Dubai, they picture a specific kind of person: old money, inherited wealth, someone who made their fortune doing something slightly shady in a country with a complicated legal system, and who chose Dubai because it doesn't ask too many questions. That image is wrong, or at least it is massively incomplete. The people who moved to Dubai in 2025, the 9,800 high net worth individuals recorded by the Henley Private Wealth Migration Report, were, in the majority, something very different. They were entrepreneurs, tech founders, who had built and sold companies, asset managers, who had spent 20 years running portfolios in London or Singapore, and had finally decided they were done subsidizing governments that treated them like a problem to be taxed, rather than a resource to be valued. They were, in other words, exactly the kind of people who are very good at making decisions, rational decisions, calculated decisions made on data, information, and careful analysis. These are not people who act on emotion. These are people who built substantial wealth precisely because they are better at processing information and acting on it than the average person. The decision to move to Dubai was not impulsive. For most of them, it took months or even years of research, analysis of tax environments, legal protections, quality of life, business ecosystem, global connectivity, and the decision to leave, which appeared from the outside to be sudden and panicked, was, in the mind of someone like James, equally analytical. It just happened to be analysis that arrived at a conclusion very, very fast. Here is the number that tells you everything. In 2025, the UAE attracted 9,800 millionaires, more than any country on earth. At the same time, the UK was losing 10,600 wealthy residents per year, the largest outflow in British history. India was losing 4,300. China was losing 15,000. All of them were moving somewhere, and Dubai was winning the competition by a margin that seemed to be growing every year. These were not people running away from something. They were people running toward the best available option, which means that when the best available option suddenly stopped being the best available option, they did not hesitate. There is a concept in behavioral economics called loss aversion. Losing something hurts roughly twice as much as gaining the same thing feels good. Human beings are wired to prioritize avoiding loss over acquiring gain. But here is what most people don't understand. About the ultra-wealthy, loss aversion works differently. At extreme levels of wealth, when you have $50 million, you have already solved the problem of survival. You have already solved comfort. You have already solved your children's futures. At that level, the primary psychological driver is no longer, how do I make more money? It becomes something much more primal. How do I not lose what I have? This is the central psychology of the very wealthy that most people completely misunderstand. We assume that rich people are primarily motivated by getting richer, but the richer you are, the more dominant the fear of loss becomes, and the most catastrophic loss, the one that cannot be recovered from by any financial means, is not money, it is safety, physical safety, the safety of your family, the safety of your children, the safety of the environment your life is built inside. When James woke up at 4 a.m. and heard the sirens, the distant sound of interceptions in the night sky, the emergency alerts on his phone, he did not run a financial model. He did not call his accountant. He did not wait for a government announcement. He did something much more ancient and much more reliable. He assessed the threat. And he acted. This is the psychology that drove the fastest departure of concentrated wealth from any single city in modern history. It was not panic in the chaotic, irrational sense. It was the opposite, extraordinarily rational behavior, executed at the speed of people who are very good at making high-stakes decisions under pressure. The calculation was not complicated. I moved to Dubai because it offered me the best combination of financial advantages and personal safety. The financial advantages are still here. The personal safety is no longer here. Therefore, the calculation has changed. Therefore, I leave. That calculation took James approximately 4 minutes, and approximately 9,799 other people reached the same conclusion within days. Before we talk about why they left, we need to talk about who they are, because when most people hear the world's richest people are fleeing Dubai, they picture a specific kind of person: old money, inherited wealth, someone who made their fortune doing something slightly shady in a country with a complicated legal system, and who chose Dubai because it doesn't ask too many questions. That image is wrong, or at least it is massively incomplete. The people who moved to Dubai in 2025, the 9,800 high net worth individuals recorded by the Henley Private Wealth Migration Report, were, in the majority, something very different. They were entrepreneurs, tech founders, who had built and sold companies, exit managers, who had spent 20 years running portfolios in London or Singapore, and had finally decided they were done subsidizing governments that treated them like a problem to be taxed, rather than a resource to be valued. They were, in other words, exactly the kind of people who are very good at making decisions, rational decisions, calculated decisions, made on data, information, and careful analysis. These are not people who act on emotion. These are people who built substantial wealth, precisely because they are better at processing information and acting on it than the average person. The decision to move to Dubai was not impulsive. For most of them, it took months or even years of research, analysis of tax environments, legal protections, quality of life, business ecosystem, global connectivity, and the decision to leave, which appeared from the outside to be sudden and panicked, was, in the mind of someone like James, equally analytical. It just happened to be analysis that arrived at a conclusion very, very fast. Here is the number that tells you everything. In 2025, the UAE attracted 9,800 millionaires. More than any country on earth. At the same time, the UK was losing 10,600 wealthy residents per year, the largest outflow in British history. India was losing 4,300. China was losing 15,000. All of them were moving somewhere, and Dubai was winning the competition by a margin that seemed to be growing every year. These were not people running away from something. They were people running toward the best available option, which means that when the best available option suddenly stopped being the best available option, they did not hesitate. So if not Dubai, where? The movement of the world's wealthy is not random. It follows patterns and logic, and understanding where they are going tells you everything about what the smart money believes about the world right now. The first wave went back to where it came from, London, which had hemorrhaged wealthy residents for years, began reporting them back. The irony is almost perfect. The same people who had fled the UK's 45% income tax and anti-wealth political environment called their London estate agents within days of the attack. Why? Because for all its flaws, and the wealthy absolutely knew its flaws, they had catalogued them extensively before they left. London had something Dubai now lacked. London was not in the Middle East. London had not just been hit by missiles. Boring is underrated. Boring is what you want. When the alternative is a city where your hotel might be struck by an Iranian drone. The second wave went to Switzerland. Switzerland deserves particular attention because it represents something very specific. It is the country that has made neutrality its entire national identity for over 200 years and has never once wavered, not through World War I, not through World War II, not through the Cold War. Dubai had been trying to be Switzerland. For the 21st century, after February 28th, the wealthy decided they would rather just use the original. Swiss private banks reported inquiries at levels they had not seen since 2008. Geneva property prices began a rapid appreciation as demand from returning wealthy clients crimsons an already tight market. The third wave, the most strategically significant, went to Singapore. Singapore had been quietly positioning itself for years as the stable, legally robust, geographically safer alternative to Dubai. It had the infrastructure, the legal protections, the family office ecosystem. It just did not have Dubai's glamour or tax advantages. After February 28th, glamour and tax advantages were no longer the deciding factors. Safety was. And Singapore had it. Singapore has a genuinely independent judiciary. Rule of law that applies even to the government itself. Its government is many things. But it is predictable. It does not change direction suddenly. And it sits at a significant physical distance from the Middle East. Singapore's family office registrations began rising sharply in March 2026. Luxury property prices in prime central districts moved upward fast. The important thing is not the destination, it is the logic. The world's wealthy were not just leaving Dubai. They were redefining what a safe haven means in the 21st century. Safety now meant physically distant from active conflict zones, legal framework independent of any single government, political environment that is stable and predictable over decades, and critically, not a promise of neutrality, a proven centuries-long record of it. Dubai had built a promise, Switzerland and Singapore had built records. After February 28th, the wealthy decided they wanted records. Here is the bigger picture. This story reveals we are living in the great recalibration of risk for 30 years. From the end of the Cold War to roughly 2020, the dominant assumption was that geopolitical risk was declining. The world was becoming more integrated, more peaceful, more interconnected. The logic of trade was slowly replacing the logic of conflict. Dubai was built entirely on that assumption. It was the ultimate expression of it. A city that bet everything on the idea that commerce had permanently superseded conflict as the organizing logic of international relations. That assumption has been wrong for several years now. Wrong when Russia invaded Ukraine. Wrong when supply chains collapsed. Wrong when the Middle East reignited in ways that spread further and faster than anyone predicted. And on February 28th, 2026, it was demonstrated wrong. In the most visceral, undeniable way possible. The world's wealthy were not just reacting to Dubai. They were reacting to a broader signal. The signal, geopolitical risk, is real again. The era of frictionless, borderless, conflict-free global wealth mobility that defined the last 3 decades is over, and in a world where geopolitical risk is real. The rules for where you store your wealth and your family have fundamentally changed. Dubai understood the rules of the old world better than anyone. Zero taxes, max connectivity, global neutrality. That was the formula for the era of globalization. The new formula, the one the wealthy are now building their lives around, is different. It still includes tax efficiency, but it now weights something far more heavily. Proven stability, genuine neutrality, physical distance from where the world's conflicts are most likely to occur. Singapore, Switzerland, the Channel Islands, parts of the Caribbean, even the UK, for all its dysfunction, scores well on these new metrics. Dubai does not. And that is why the richest people in the world are leaving. Not because Dubai failed at what it promised, but because the world moved to a new chapter that Dubai's promise was not designed for. James, the hedge fund manager from the beginning of this video. I want to tell you where he is now. He is in London. He has rented a house in Knightsbridge. He is paying 45% income tax again. He hates it. But here is what he told the journalist who interviewed him in April 2026. And I want you to sit with this. He said, "I used to think the worst thing that could happen to me was paying too much tax. I know now. That was the wrong thing to be afraid of." That single sentence contains more financial wisdom than most people accumulate in a lifetime. The world's richest people are not leaving Dubai because they have given up on finding a better place to live. They are leaving because February 28th taught them something that no amount of reading or analysis could have taught them as efficiently. It taught them what they are actually afraid of. It is not taxes, it is the feeling of being in the wrong place when the wrong thing happens. And the cities that understand this, the cities that can offer not just financial efficiency, but genuine, long-term proven safety, are the cities that are about to win the next generation of the global wealth competition. Dubai will rebuild. Dubai will adapt. It has done it before. But the 9,800 people who chose it in 2025 and the 40,000 who left in 2026 have sent a signal to every city on earth competing for their presence. Safety is not a feature. Safety is the foundation, and without it, nothing else you offer matters. If this video changed how you think about wealth, about cities, about the signals the smart money sends to the rest of us, subscribe. This channel exists to explain the real logic underneath the world's biggest stories, not what the richest people did, why they did it. There is a lot more coming.